Hey, welcome back to an exciting episode of In the Chute. I'm Brandon. He's Kalen. I'm the dad because I'm looking haggard and old, and yeah, he hasn't got any wrinkles yet. He hasn't got any war wounds like that. So anyway, Kalen, what have you got for me today?
I was looking at Ag Daily today, and there was an article that came out 2 days ago saying that the United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, has gotten some research service done. And actually, I think it might be coinciding with what a friend told us recently about the use of NASA and satellites, because they're developing an approach or a technique to use satellite imagery to predict cattle weight gain on rangelands. So that tells me they're looking at grasslands, how they're being handled, what the moisture content is, and all that. I'm sure they're taking in meteorological records and stuff like that. But it looks like they're trying to use technology to kind of predict where these cattle are going to be at weight wise for the sale time in the fall, or maybe even winter when you've got those feeders going through. And I think that's kind of an interesting topic because it's something that we do plan on discussing in the next year. But what are kind of your initial thoughts on that, with the use of satellites to be able to see what is happening on the rangeland specifically to predict cattle gain, cattle weight gain and whatnot?
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really interesting tool. Um, there's a variety of uh, uses for that, really, not just for cattle,
Yeah.
but for, farm ground, um, the type of crop, and there's a lot of stuff about, deforestation in, say, the Amazon, how it's going to kill us all. Well, you know what? When you plant a lot of corn or a lot of cover crop in something, that also produces what, what is being taken away somewhere else. So it's not a net sum change to the negative. And through satellite imagery, you could certainly then begin to, I would think, track that and then predict that like you would the weather in a different way. You can see seasonally what's coming using some of the meteorological type techniques and tools we have, which just goes right into, okay, this crop is going to do well. We've got this amount of moisture in the ground. That's a real thing, measurable, easily measurable. And then that coupled with some of the satellite imagery and what's going on. I would imagine, I don't know exactly what they're using, but the technology, how detailed and what they're looking at, but you could probably, I'm sure, see what the crop is. And from that area, how does it compare to other crops around? How does it compare to other species of either grass or crops that are being planted? And I'm sure it's like, what color is it? How deep a green is it? Is it deficient in something?
Well,
All of those kinds of things.
I'm wondering if like infrared, maybe UV indexes and stuff like that too are helping, because I would imagine the same technology you can use in the forest, like you're saying, not necessarily with deforestation, but predicting hot spots, pardon the pun, for like forest fires and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Seeing, this is significantly drier, less humidity. They might have a higher chance of wildfire in this region because there's also a lot of undergrowth. And I think that's kind of cool that it's not just applicable to ag, but you can use it throughout the nation to do stuff like that.
Well, and you can see that on the ground. I mean, you can't tell from the satellite necessarily what the percent humidity is in, like your brother would say, a 50-hour fuel or 100-hour fuel, those kinds of things. They're not going to be able to necessarily tell that. That's a on the ground type thing. But if you can predict where it's moving towards, or some of the larger scale dry and wet spots across a territory or an area, like the Northwest or the Midwest, the East Coast, things like that, you could begin to track that. But that's going to take data, I think. You can't just say, oh, this is what we're seeing. You have to have real-time past data and imagery from that to really be more accurate about it. I mean, and again, the problem is this can be used as a tool for good or a tool for propaganda. So,
yeah, well, that's
one
fair,
has to be really careful for that.
That is something that we fight constantly, is the accuracy with information that's dispelled when it comes to the beef industry. But so you're saying the use of records over time. So do you think this for cattle weight gain, do you think it's going to be useful in the next 20 years, or do you think it'll be useful now, just not nearly as accurate as it would be in a couple of decades?
Well, yeah, I think that you've got to do a lot of base work
Uh-huh.
to make it usable now. You have to go back and look at, okay, do we have some satellite imagery that we didn't use for this purpose? We review that and then put real-time data, what we had on the ground with, you know, what people do. And, you know, we track what our weight gain is. I mean, most people, I think, who are trying to improve or do better should. Some don't. They just, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, in the fall, oh, it's a bad year. Well, why?
Right.
You know, some people just, you know, it's not there for them. But I think the longer it goes, the more accurate you're going to get, and especially the predicting portion.
That's what I was thinking too, though, is like that portion is, you know, you're talking about looking back at the different, you know, the different ground and stuff with the satellite imagery, but I'm also thinking like prices too, because what's weight on cattle? It's money in our pockets. So I'm thinking, you know, that could possibly be a driving factor to predict cattle markets too. Do you think, or no? Because that's a completely different situation when it comes to like business and all that.
Well, I think it could be, because now you're opening up another area of looking at a globe and saying, okay, we're going to have a drought in, you know, the South America, which really doesn't necessarily happen that often, but it does happen. I mean, why did the Mayans leave?
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, you're going to have short and long-term drought. And if you've got a lot of drought in most of the areas, and a small area has some good moisture, good crops, and that's really what you're looking at for weight gain on cattle is, what are they eating? Is it good? Is it nutritious? Is it too hot for them? You know, that kind of thing. Reproductive issues, you know, are you going to have enough cattle? Are you going to have a high propensity of not cows not conceiving, you know, or dry cows? So there's some real world application for it. But if you look on a global scale and say, well, we're going to have a lot of reduced numbers in cattle here, or light weights in this area, the price in another area can be increased because, hey, they've got good cattle, they've got a lot of weight gain. So the price for those animals is going to probably be a little bit higher because it's a supply and demand issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are you talking globally or mostly just US centric?
Well, I think both. I mean, we do export, you know, a good share of beef, and supposedly this year this last year we exported more beef than ever.
I've also taken
are we yeah, exactly. You know, well, it's like I've said this before, your grandpa used to say, statistics are like a bikini. You know, what they reveal is interesting, but what they hide is vital. So
yeah. But I mean, the other thing too is, I mean, just in exports, you could say, well, we've exported more boxed beef than ever. Well, that could be the amount of boxes in beef, and you've just taken a cow that was in 4 boxes originally, now put it in 6, and you've just increased your box beef.
Yeah, so I don't know that they would hide it that much, because whoever's doing that then is having a higher overhead, which is, you know, higher to, you know, more to do. But I think is what you count as beef. If you brought in a bunch of beef from boxed beef, say from Brazil, you brought it in and then you sent that over to Taiwan, calling it here we go with our country of origin labeling, and you say that's an American made deal, does that count as an export or as an import? And which one do you count for your purposes?
Right.
That could happen.
Especially when you're just the middleman, really.
Right. So you could count that, you know, as an import, or not count it as an import because you're calling it American, you know, made or product of the USA. You know, is I think the way a lot of things are labeled, which you can argue, hey, it came through here, put our label on it, and now we exported it, but it's really a product of Brazil.
Well, and you're bringing up a good point too, is the importing and exporting of beef both, and using the satellite imagery to try and figure out weight gain and stuff like that to understand weight of cattle. Do you think then, do you think imports and exports of not even just beef, but animals in general, livestock for consumption, will change from per head to per pound in that case? Do you think
Well,
that's potentially a future?
it really does right now anyway. I mean, because you have individuals that put on pounds. It's just the
Yeah.
weight of that individual. You can't just have a 40-pound critter or 40 pounds of meat running around there. It's still got to be attached to an individual. So I don't think that that changes much. It changes the price per pound, but it's still based on the individual. So yeah, I don't see that happening. Somebody may say, yeah, we want to take 2,000 tons of your meat, and we want it in the form of half carcasses or boxed beef in the form of only hamburger. I mean, you can do a lot of things like that, or they could, specialty order stuff. But as far as having the ability to, um, predict imports based on that would only be probably based on what the production you're going to have. And we import plenty of beef also. We've complained a little bit about that, but we understand trade too.
Yeah.
So, you could say, okay, it's going to be really, really dry in X part of the country, and they are not going to be able to have the cattle to export. They're only going to be able to import what we give them. Then, that's going to drive the market that way too. So, and it may not be us, it may be Australian beef that fills that market, because they're doing really, really well for some reason down there in, the northern Australia.
Yeah, I know why. It's because of butcher box.
Well, there you go. I mean,
100%. Butcher box is out of New Zealand, and
yeah,
I mean northern Australia, New Zealand. It's kind of one and the same, just a little bit of ocean between the two of them. But yeah,
I think New Zealanders will say that they are rabidly independent of Australia, but
they are. But I'm saying regionally, they're
regionally,
roughly the same. Yeah,
you're correct. That's right. But it's still a competitor of ours.
Right.
And they may be competitor of each other, but they have some people straddling that wire where they're got their foot in both countries that are taking what they can. So, and good for them. I mean, that's kind of what that's about, that entrepreneurial endeavors to be able to, make money at what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, with that, we will put the topic of USDA satellites and cattle gain to pasture.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, it's good.